She looked right at me and called me a glorified babysitter. Not quietly, not under her breath. She said it loud enough for everyone at the Thanksgiving table to hear. My mother heard it. My brother heard it. My sister-in-law heard it. And my wife heard every single word. For a second, I thought my wife Elizabeth would step in. I thought she would tell her daughter that she had gone too far. I thought she would do what a husband expects his wife to do when someone disrespects him in front of the whole family. Instead, Elizabeth calmly put down her fork, looked at me, and said the words that changed everything. "She's not your daughter, Mike. Don't correct her." Those words ended something inside me. Before I tell you what happened next, there is something you need to understand about me. I'm not a man who loses control. For 31 years, I served in the military. After that, I spent 10 years building and running my own private security consulting company in Roanoke, Virginia. Those years taught me something important. When people are emotional, they make mistakes. When people react without thinking, they lose. So I never make important decisions when I'm angry. I think first, then I act. That night I smiled. I picked up my glass of water. I took a slow sip. Then I looked at Jenny and smiled as if she had said something completely harmless. Around the table, everyone sat in shocked silence. Nobody understood what that smile meant. But I did. Because at that moment, I already knew exactly what I was going to do. My name is Mike Jason Mercer. I am 53 years old. I spent most of my life serving my country. I traveled to places most people have never heard of. I faced danger. I faced pressure. And when I finally came home, I built a life with my own hands. My company works with businesses across several states. I own my home. I live only a few blocks away from the neighborhood where I grew up. I'm not a complicated man. I believe in loyalty. I believe in hard work. And I believe that when you commit to someone, you stand by them. At least, I used to think everyone believed that. I met Elizabeth about 2.5 years earlier at a charity event for veterans' families. She immediately stood out. She was confident, smart, strong. The kind of woman who walked into a room and knew exactly who she was. She worked as a hospital administrator and had spent years building a successful career. Elizabeth also had a daughter named Jenny. Jenny was 20 years old when we met. She was studying business at a university in Northern Virginia. Elizabeth had raised her alone since her first marriage ended years earlier. I respected that. Raising a child by yourself isn't easy. When Elizabeth and I started dating seriously, I understood that Jenny would always be part of the picture. I had never had children myself. My first marriage ended before we started a family. Then years of military service and building a business filled the rest of my life. Fatherhood simply never happened. So when I married Elizabeth, I wasn't expecting to become anyone's father. I only hoped to become part of a family. What I didn't realize at first was that Elizabeth and Jenny had a relationship that left very little room for anyone else. Elizabeth always said the same thing. Jenny comes first. At first, that sounded normal. Parents should care about their children. But over time, I realized it wasn't just something she said. It was the rule that controlled everything. Every decision, every conversation, every conflict. Jenny always came first. Always. 11 months before that Thanksgiving dinner, Elizabeth and I got married in a small ceremony in Charlottesville. The mountains were beautiful. The leaves had turned orange and red. The weather was perfect. My brother Wesley and his wife, Patricia, came from Pennsylvania. My mother flew in from Florida. It should have been one of the happiest days of my life. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore. Jenny. She stood through the entire ceremony with her arms crossed. She looked annoyed. Almost angry. Like she didn't want to be there. I noticed it. Of course I noticed it. But I told myself she was nervous. Maybe she was struggling with change. Maybe she just needed time. I wanted to believe the best. That was my first mistake. After the wedding, Jenny continued living near her college campus. Elizabeth paid her tuition. Elizabeth paid her living expenses. Elizabeth paid for her car. I never complained. Jenny was Rhonda's daughter. I respected that. I wasn't trying to force my way into a father role. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I only wanted us to get along. The first few months were difficult. Jenny was never openly rude. Not at first. She was simply cold. She answered questions with one-word replies. She avoided conversations. She left as quickly as possible whenever she visited. Elizabeth never encouraged her to make an effort. She never said things like, "Give Mike a chance." She never told Jenny that I cared. She never pushed her daughter at all. Still, I kept trying. One winter night, Jenny's tire blew out during an ice storm. It was almost 11 o'clock. She was stuck on the side of Interstate 81. I got in my truck and drove out there. I waited with her until the tow truck arrived. She barely spoke the entire time. A few months later, her laptop stopped working right before final exams. The next morning, I bought her a new one. I dropped it off at her apartment. No speeches. No expectations. Just helping. When she needed a recommendation letter for a summer internship, I wrote one myself. I used my company letterhead. I connected her with professional contacts. I genuinely wanted her to succeed. The internship helped her future. I knew that, and I was happy to help. But Jenny never really thanked me. Not in a meaningful way. Not once. Whenever I helped, Elizabeth would tell me how kind I was. But she never asked Jenny to appreciate any of it. Never. I told myself it wasn't important. Families take time. Relationships take time. You can't force people to care. So I stayed patient. Then Thanksgiving arrived, and everything changed. My mother, Beverly, flew in from Florida. She was 76 years old. She had the kindest heart of anyone I knew. My brother Wesley and Patricia drove several hours to spend the holiday with us. I wanted everything to be perfect. I spent days preparing. I smoked a turkey using a recipe I had learned years ago. I made my mother's cornbread dressing. Elizabeth made sweet potato pie and green bean casserole. The house smelled amazing. It felt like family. At least it did for a while. Jenny arrived that afternoon. The moment she walked through the door, I felt the familiar coldness. She wasn't rude, but she acted like being there was a chore, like she was doing everyone a favor. My mother greeted her warmly. That's just who my mother is. She asked about school. She asked about Jenny's internship. She asked about her classes. Jenny answered politely but only barely. Short answers. No warmth. No effort. Dinner started around 4:30. The table looked beautiful. Candles glowed softly. Everyone settled into their seats. My mother said grace. Wesley poured wine. Patricia told a funny story about their drive through the Shenandoah Valley. People laughed. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then I made a mistake. At least that's what it felt like afterward. I asked Jenny how her finals were going. That was it. A simple question. I knew she had difficult exams coming up. Months earlier, I had even connected her with a former colleague who tutored economics students. I had done that quietly, without asking for credit. I just wanted to help. Jenny looked at me. Really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw exactly how she felt. The expression on her face shocked me. It wasn't annoyance. It wasn't discomfort. It was contempt. Pure contempt. It's fine, she said. Not that you'd understand any of it. The room instantly grew quiet. I could feel everyone listening. I kept my voice calm. You're right, I said. My background is different. I was only asking how things were going. Jenny leaned back in her chair. She looked almost comfortable now, like she had been waiting for this moment. You ask a lot of questions for someone who isn't really part of this family. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then she delivered the final blow. You're basically just mom's husband. A glorified babysitter who signed some paperwork. Silence. Absolute silence. My brother slowly set down his fork. Patricia stared at the table. My mother looked heartbroken. I looked at Rhonda. For one brief second, I thought she understood how wrong this was. I thought she would stop it. I thought she would defend me. Then she looked at me and quietly said the words I will never forget. She's not your daughter, Mike. Don't correct her. And just like that, everything changed. The next few seconds felt strangely calm. On the outside, I simply picked up my glass of water. I took a sip. Then I smiled. To everyone else at the table, that smile probably looked confusing. But inside my head, something had become very clear. 31 years in the military teaches you something important. You don't make major decisions while emotions are running high. You wait. You think. You gather information. Then you act. So instead of arguing, I looked at my mother. Her eyes were full of sadness. Not for herself. For me. She had watched her son get insulted in his own home. Worse, she had watched his wife defend the person who insulted him. I knew she wanted to say something. I knew Wesley wanted to say something too. But I wouldn't let Thanksgiving become a battlefield. Not that day. So I smiled and said, Mom, tell Wesley about that ghost tour you took in Savannah. My mother understood immediately. She always did. She picked up the conversation and started talking about her trip. Wesley followed. Patricia followed. Little by little, the dinner moved forward. But the mood never fully recovered. Everyone knew what had happened. Nobody forgot. After dessert, Jenny left quickly. She said she needed to get back to campus. Elizabeth walked her to the door. I stayed behind and cleared plates from the table. Nobody mentioned the incident. Not directly. But the silence spoke loudly enough. Later that evening, Wesley caught my eye while Elizabeth was in the kitchen. He gave me a look that only a brother could give. A look that said everything without words. Are you okay? I gave him a small nod. Leave it alone. I understand. My mother hugged me before bed. She held on longer than usual. That hug told me she understood exactly how much those words had hurt. After everyone went to sleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The house was silent. The darkness felt heavy. I replayed every moment of dinner. Jenny's face. Her words. Rhonda's response. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something important. The problem wasn't only what Jenny had said. The problem was what Elizabeth had done. Jenny was 21. Young people make mistakes. Young people say cruel things. But Elizabeth was my wife. She was supposed to be my partner. Instead, she had chosen a side. And it wasn't mine. Around midnight, my decision was made. The smile at dinner had not been forgiveness. It had been strategy. The next morning, I woke up early. Very early. At 7:15, while Elizabeth was still asleep, I made my first phone call. I called my attorney, Garrett. Garrett had handled business contracts for me for years. He knew my situation. He knew my finances. I explained everything that had happened. Then I asked several questions about our financial arrangements. The answers came quickly. Before marrying Elizabeth, we had signed a prenuptial agreement. Not because we didn't trust each other. Because clear agreements prevent problems. The prenup protected everything I owned before marriage. It also made something else very clear. Any financial help I voluntarily gave to Jenny was exactly that. Voluntary. I could continue it, or I could stop it. The choice was mine. After speaking with Garrett, I made another call. This time to the university billing department. A few months after the wedding, I had started helping with Jenny's tuition. Elizabeth had been dealing with unexpected expenses. I wanted to support my wife, so I contributed a large amount toward Jenny's education. There was no contract, no obligation, no promise, just goodwill. That morning, I removed my authorization from the account. Quietly, professionally, no drama. Then I made a third call. This one concerned Jenny's car. Months earlier, when her old vehicle needed expensive repairs, I had helped Elizabeth secure a better lease by becoming a co-signer. At the time, it felt like helping family. Now I wanted information about my options. The dealership explained everything. I listened carefully, asked questions, took notes. I didn't make any rash decisions. I simply prepared. Preparation has always been one of my strengths. By 8:30, Elizabeth was awake. She was making coffee in the kitchen. She smiled when I walked downstairs. A normal smile. Like Thanksgiving had been completely normal. Like nothing had happened. I poured myself coffee and sat down. "We need to talk about yesterday," I said. Her smile faded slightly. "Jenny is adjusting," she said. "This has been hard for her." I looked at her. She called me a glorified babysitter in front of my family. She didn't mean it. Then what did she mean? Elizabeth sighed. "She's still young." I stared at her. Young enough to insult me but too young to be responsible for it? Her expression tightened. "Mike, she's my daughter." "I know. She's my priority." There it was again. The same phrase. The same rule. Jenny first. Always. I took a slow breath. I need to know where I fit into that. "You're my husband." Then why did it look like I had no right to defend myself at my own table? Her face hardened. "You're overreacting." The second she said those words, something inside me settled. Overreacting. That was how she described it. Not disrespect. Not humiliation. Not betrayal. Overreacting. I finished my coffee. Then I stood up. "I have some work to do at the office." The conversation ended there. But the decision did not. Over the next 2 days, I followed through. I removed my tuition contributions. I began removing myself from financial obligations connected to Jenny. I redirected funds back into my own accounts. Then I waited. The phone call came exactly when I expected it. The day after Thanksgiving. A little after 2 in the afternoon. I was sitting in my office reviewing reports when my phone rang. "Elizabeth." I answered. Her voice sounded different. Higher. Less controlled. "I got a notice from the university." "I know." "And from the dealership." "I know." There was a pause. Then she asked the question. "What did you do?" "I withdrew my voluntary financial support." "You can't do that." "I can. Mike." I verified everything with Garrett. Silence. Long silence. Then she spoke again. "Jenny could lose her housing placement." I remained calm. "I understand. She needs that car." "I know." "So you're punishing her?" That question hung in the air. I let several seconds pass before answering. "Yesterday you said I was overreacting." Silence. "Today you're saying she said something thoughtless." More silence. "Those two things don't fit together very well, Elizabeth." I could almost hear her thinking. Trying to find a response. Trying to regain control of the conversation. Finally, she asked quietly, "What do you want?" That was the real question. And I already knew the answer. "I want you to understand what this marriage is." She didn't reply. So I continued. "For almost a year, I have helped support Jenny. Financially. Personally. Professionally. I didn't do it because I had to. I did it because I cared." I paused. Then I said the hardest part. "When she insulted me and you defended her, you showed me exactly how little that support meant." The silence that followed was even longer. Finally, Elizabeth spoke. "I won't let you use money to control my daughter." "I'm not controlling anyone." "Then what are you doing?" "I'm stepping back from something I was giving freely." She didn't like that answer. But she couldn't argue with it. Because it was true. Eventually she sighed. "I'll figure out the finances." "I know you will." And Jenny isn't apologizing. I leaned back in my chair. That sentence told me everything. Not because Jenny refused to apologize. Because Elizabeth saw nothing wrong with that. Then we both know where we stand. The call ended. The weeks that followed were difficult. Not loud. Not explosive. Just heavy. The kind of tension that fills every room. Elizabeth managed the financial problems. To her credit, she handled them. She took responsibility for Jenny's tuition. She rearranged her finances. She refinanced what needed refinancing. She solved it. But the deeper problem remained. The respect problem. The marriage problem. The trust problem. One evening, several weeks later, Elizabeth walked into my home office and closed the door behind her. That immediately got my attention. She sat down across from me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she finally said it. I handled Thanksgiving badly. I stayed quiet. I should have said something. Still, I said nothing. Jenny was rude. There it was. The truth. Finally. I know I'm not good at criticizing her. Her eyes dropped toward her hands. I've spent 21 years protecting her. I know. Somewhere along the way, I stopped holding her accountable. I nodded slowly. I noticed. A sad smile crossed her face. I figured. Then her expression became serious again. When you removed the financial support, she called me crying. I remembered that. I know. She thought she might have to leave school. I looked at Elizabeth carefully. That wasn't my goal. Then what was? The goal was understanding. She frowned. What does that mean? It means I wanted both of you to understand that my contributions matter. I leaned forward. I'm not furniture, Elizabeth. I'm not a wallet. I'm not some invisible person who exists only to help. Her eyes filled with emotion. For the first time, I could see she was really listening. After a long silence, she said something unexpected. Jenny wants to apologize. That surprised me. I didn't show it. Years of military training helped with that. But inside, I was genuinely surprised. What changed? My mother called her. I couldn't help smiling a little. My mother. Of course. Beverly Mercer had always possessed a quiet kind of wisdom. She didn't yell. She didn't lecture. But somehow people listened. What did she say? Elizabeth smiled slightly. Something about how she raised her son to show up for people. I looked down for a moment. That sounded exactly like my mother. Eventually I nodded. I'll talk to Jenny. A week later, Jenny came to the house. She sat at the same kitchen table where everything had happened. The same table. The same chairs. The same room. Only the atmosphere felt different. She looked nervous. Not angry. Not cold. Just nervous. For a moment, she looked less like an adult and more like a young woman trying to fix a mistake. Finally she spoke. I owe you an apology. I listened. She admitted that she had been taking her frustrations out on me. She admitted she never gave me a fair chance. She admitted she had treated me badly long before Thanksgiving. Most importantly, she admitted that I didn't deserve what she said. Then she looked me in the eye. I'm sorry. No excuses. No blame. Just an apology. I respected that. I accept your apology. Relief appeared on her face immediately. But I wasn't finished. I need you to understand something. She nodded. I was never trying to replace your father. Her eyes softened. I wasn't trying to become your dad. I know. I only wanted to be someone good in your life because I love your mother. She looked down. Then back up. I understand. I continued. But being decent doesn't mean being invisible. The words landed. I could see it. What you said at Thanksgiving was meant to make me feel invisible. Jenny swallowed hard. I know. We need something different going forward. She nodded again. Respect. Yes. Not fake closeness. Okay. Not pretending. Okay. Just respect. I can do that. It wasn't a dramatic movie moment. Nobody cried. Nobody hugged. There were no grand speeches. Just honesty. Sometimes that's enough. Today things are better. Not perfect. Better. Elizabeth and I are still married. We started couples counseling. We're working through difficult truths. Real truths. The kind that don't disappear overnight. Jenny is still in school. Elizabeth handles her finances completely. I stepped away from that role. Not because I'm angry anymore. Because clear boundaries matter. If a genuine relationship grows over time, that's wonderful. But I'm done investing ahead of the relationship. Now the relationship comes first. Then everything else. A few weeks after Thanksgiving, my mother mailed me a card. Inside were 3 simple sentences. You showed more grace than most people could. Your father would have been proud. I love you. I still keep that card in my desk drawer. A few days later, Wesley called me. He said something I'll never forget. I've seen you under real danger. I've seen you under pressure. But I've never been prouder of you than I was at that dinner table. That meant a lot coming from him. Because he knew exactly how hard it had been. The truth is, the hardest part wasn't the confrontation. The hardest part was what came after. The quiet moments. The uncertainty. Wondering if the family you believed you were building could still become real. I don't have every answer yet. Maybe I never will. But I do know this. The morning after Thanksgiving, I wasn't destroying anything. I was answering a question. A question that had been building for months. Do they understand my value? Do they understand what I bring to this family? At Thanksgiving, the answer was no. So I made sure they learned. And eventually they did.